Oh, hello. Welcome to the Trade Game channel. This is Daniel. It is January the 19th, and we are talking about trading cryptocurrency. Specifically, this video is going to be about our proposed trade for SXP Solar. This coin has been around since the last bull market. It's not a new one, not a small cap experimental coin or anything. Excuse me. All right. So we have not opened a bot on this one yet, but we're going to soon. Is the plan. And I always kind of want to go over kind of some of what I've proposed and what we may be some changes we may be making. So we have suggested within our group of people, it has been suggested by one of our members that, and I think that they're right, that XRP has been trading in a wedge, and XRP, SXP Solar, I should say, has been trading in a wedge and appears to be breaking to the downside, or at least it's sort of testing the downside. We'll see if it how it fares. So it does look like we may be getting ready to break to the downside with Solar. I don't think that this is particularly unlikely. I think that a downwards correction is not unlikely. For Solar, let me get back to my sort of usual rigmarole here. Bitcoin came up and tested the top of its little channel it's trading in here. Got up to about 106. Woohoo, pretty good. But tested that level, found resistance, and now is correcting down. Kind of not that surprising for me. As I said, often with big news events of anticipation, things sort of price in of Bitcoin. And we were due for a swing up anyway. So we'll see if Bitcoin doesn't start going down, which is kind of what I'm expecting. And so a lot of other things will move in tandem with Bitcoin when this kind of thing happens. So I wouldn't be too terribly surprised as this coin's been moving down with Bitcoin, as Bitcoin's correcting down. And it seems to be this wedge pattern seems to be breaking down, or at least testing its support levels. We'll kind of see if there isn't a downwards move or a challenge to support for Solar here soon. So my suggested trigger price for this bot now is, mind you, I've set trigger prices a little too high before and a little too low too. It's all about dialing these things in. Was right down here at this level of support where we had a nice strong downward wick. Back in December, I was suggesting that we might set our trigger at about 26 cents, right at the bottom of this trigger, because if we go down and challenge our support again after breaking out of this wedge, we may find support kind of around this area where we did back in December, which is also, if you look at where this level is kind of relative to things in November and October, we had a lot of resistance around this area and also support when it was on its way down. So I don't think that that's an unreasonable level to necessarily be looking at as a significant level for this coin. It also might be a little too close to our current price action, though, because it may dip down even lower than this. If it is indeed looking to be bearish here for a little while. So let's talk first about, so that was my suggestion, was that we put our trigger price at around 26 cents, which is to say or we just kind of watch the bot and start it manually at around that point, depending on what we think is going to happen. To address some of the questions I've been getting, I set these triggers and try to start these bots with these triggers more because I have a full-time job and I have all of these other stuff going on, these things going on. It's kind of hard for me to actually be there to start the bot manually. So if I see an opportunity to start one of these manually that I think is a good opportunity, I will do that. But a lot of times I'm trying to figure out where I would like it to start if the price action can go where I expect it to go. Um, but what I need to be doing, what I sort of didn't do super well with, I think I tried to open, yeah, I tried to open a higher, a small bot with not a whole lot of money, but with higher leverage on Ethereum, and it got liquidated out because I set the trigger price way too high. Um, is I probably need to be kind of setting these trigger prices much lower than I'm actually thinking of opening the bot at, and then trying to manually open them myself when I actually think it's time. And just have the trigger prices be there just on the off chance that we catch um, a really quick downwards wick, um, and we might be able to catch a really good opening position. Uh, So I had suggested for this spot that we put the grid down to I think it was 16, yeah, 16 cents on the bottom and $1 on the top. The reason that I picked 16 cents for the bottom of the grid is because that is right at or right below this point. This is the lowest price at which solar has traded in the last year. So that being the bottom, well, really even going back further than a year, actually, of the price action for solar recently, perhaps even in the entire bear market, although I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to go back and look um, uh, at another chart. To me, that seems like a pretty reasonable point at which to set the bottom of our trading grid, right? If it gets down below its lowest low for the last year, year and a half, that's when we might need to consider just stop lossing out of the position. Um, and we did have a suggestion from a member of Trade Game here that we put a stop loss, in fact, at 15 cents. And so we may indeed do that, but it may not. It also may not matter because depending on what leverage we set the bot at, its liquidation price might be above 15 cents until it trades for a while anyhow. Um, so we'll kind of see this. We might be able to set a stop loss at 15 cents, but it may also have a liquidation price higher than 15 cents for a while. So setting a stop loss with a bot like this in an isolated position where it's not going to wipe out any of our other bots or any of our other positions if it hits liquidation is not as big a concern. Um, at least when we're getting started. But we can always add a stop loss or a take profit value to this bot after the bot has started up. That's something you can always change later. But anyways, that's just to share with you guys that that's how I set that price. Like I took the lowest price it's been at in the last year or so, and went a little bit below that. Kind of just went down to the nearest round number, and so we should be covered down to that area. Um, and then the top range of this bot I set at $1. Uh, for a couple of reasons. For one thing, psychological levels in the market are kind of a big thing. And there are certain psychological levels that people get interested in things or that are significant often for coins. 50 cents is one of them, and $1 per coin is also one of them. Um, Numbers like that are just psychologically significant in the market. But the reason specifically why I picked $1 for this coin, I did not just pick that arbitrarily as a psychological point, even though you could. and that would be a totally valid reason to pick that. Here's a weekly chart of SXP on Binance that actually goes back to the last bull market. And you can see here that solar in the last bull market got up to almost $6 per coin. And hopefully it's going back up there again, and perhaps even higher this time. But unless that happens, we don't know what's going to happen, really, with any of these things. But after the end of the last bull market in crypto here, after the whole crash happened, we got into the bear market, which is this period. And this is not really, solar has not really seen a big, huge pump, except for arguably back in March, along with everybody else, which is kind of where we were over on this graph. We were setting our levels of resistance. These are take profit levels that were suggested at about 51 cents and 55 cents, are from these highs that we set during this big pump, this big upwards movement in the market that happened around March of this year. A bunch of excitement around the halving of Bitcoin. I had set my grid, however, which is not quite a take profit, really, because we won't necessarily take profit even if it gets up to the top of the grid. I had set my trading grid, up to $1 because that's a little over the highest point that solar got to during the bear market, right? So after the end of this big period of excitement around solar, where it went up to like $6, that period ended and we got into the bear market. During the bear market, it ranged a bit, and the highest it got up to during the bear market was kind of like just under $1. And so my proposal was to trade from roughly currently where it is, or a little bit lower, up to, with our grid bot, up to just a little bit over the highest point at which it traded during the bear market, with the grid going down to, that's the lowest point, I think, actually, that it's been, at least since the last bull market. And then we could stop loss off somewhere kind of in here if we wanted to. I don't really know. A lot of times, really, with these bots, either they sort of get liquidated or they don't. You can set stop losses, but for me, that's more about just if you want to capture profits with these bots. They tend to be, for me, more of an all or nothing proposition. Either my bot will get liquidated and I'll lose all the money I used to create it, or it will just be successful and I'll just let it run for as long as I think it's going to be usefully producing revenue. Anyway, this is how I had set up my proposed ranges, though. The lowest point since the last bull market being the bottom of the grid, and the highest point being just a little bit over the highest value the coin has had since the last bull market. And hopefully over the next year, this will shoot back up to $6 or something, and we'll just have a really good, strong long position. Because if the bot starts here and the price goes up over the grid, then essentially it's a long trade at which we DCA'd in, dollar cost averaged in, over the range in which the bot was trading once it gets up over its grid. But if it goes sideways or kind of goes up and it just sort of messes about in this area, the periods when it is in the grid will be making us revenue, even if it doesn't necessarily go up and shoot the moon. So that's the advantage of these bots, is that even if an asset goes sideways, you still have sort of effectively a winning trade, even if it doesn't necessarily pump up to the moon. So that is the rationale that I have behind setting the grid the way it is. we would be trading it all the way down with this spot in an isolated position to the lowest point that it's been in its price, and trading it actively up until the highest point it was at in the bear market. And if it goes above that, then great. We just have a long position, and we can just kind of hold that if we need to, for as long as we want to. That is why I set those ranges where I did. The proposed take profit points are, I think, good ones for kind of a swing trade type situation with this, around 50 cents or 55 cents. And you could perhaps start the bot, let it trade for a while, and then if it gets up over these levels, close it and profit. But I don't know that I would. I would probably let it ride if it got up this high, rather than closing it. But we could also set the grid to a lower point like that, and have a really super dense grid with the bot trading quite a lot, quite frequently, instead of spreading it out more, the way I have it set here. And the bot would trade quite a bit more frequently. More of our money would go to trade. More of the return would go to trading fees proportionally, but it would also just do a whole lot. The grid lines would be pretty densely packed, and so it'd do quite a few transactions, and it might actually do pretty well just on account of having capturing more of this volatility on account of the grid lines being really tight and close together. Um, that being said, they're still pretty. They still would be pretty tight, pretty close together, um, regardless. uh, so I'm not super concerned about it either way. I think the bot will do totally fine. What we need to kind of figure out with this one is, are we going to do 5 times leverage, 8 times, 7 times, 10 times? I have the bot sort of set up and waiting right now, and I've got it set at 10 times leverage, which is the default. But I also might change that later depending on how we feel about our risk tolerance on this one. Um, So we've got some proposed resistance levels or take profit levels up here, that we may or may not use, uh, and a stop loss level that is, I think, very reasonable. It's a little bit lower than the bottom of the grid that I set, but I also don't know that I would necessarily want the bot to stop loss out, uh, just because it's gone below its grid a little bit. Because sometimes they'll do that and then pop right back up into their grids and do totally fine. So we can kind of talk about that and see about that. What I think is more interesting are in the recent suggestions we've been getting within our group are potential trigger prices for the bot, or entry points for the bot. Um, so what's being suggested is that we could set our trigger prices down at closer to about 18 cents or 21 or 22 cents, um, instead of my sort of more closer to the price action 26 cents, which I was sort of speculating on. And sort of speculating on this based off of just the fact that we had this big movement upwards to the upside in November, which kind of everybody benefited off of. But then we came back down and filled in this liquidity back down to this point, and saw a big downward wick right here, suggesting to me that this is an area, and looking back here, it looks like it is here as well. Uh, there used to be a resistance point and also a support point last year, and it seems to also be an area of support now, following the election results, like in this new year. Um, but we also have some extremely strong, I think, levels of support at 20 and 22 cents, and should have, so given that this is the lowest it's ever gotten, should in theory have some really strong support around 18 cents. Um, so these are other levels of interest. I in particular, I'm looking at this. This is on Blofin. This chart goes back to I think this is pretty much well. be quite that pump that I was talking about that got almost to $1. Um, but I do think that in particular around this level, you see, we kind of found support back here too, around 22 or 21 cents. Maybe a reasonable trigger point. I'm not sure. What I've done is I've got the spot going set up on my exchange uh, with the grid as I have it now, 16 cents to $1 with 10 times leverage. That's just the default. Um, it's not going to be super high like the 20 or 30 times leverage ones that I've messed with before. It's also not going to be lower like the 5 times leverage ones, so we'll have to be little careful about where we start this one somewhat. And I've got my trigger price set at 18 cents. So I don't know if we're going to see a big turn to the downside, or if so, how much of a turn we're going to see. I am gotten pretty used to Bitcoin and a lot of the crypto market kind of having a slump after a big news event. A lot of times things will price in the excitement over the news event, and then everything will kind of relax afterwards. We also have had a bit of an issue in that Donald Trump and Melania Trump and some of these other political figures in the U.S. have started issuing their own cryptocurrency coins, meme coins, that have been doing extremely well, which is not really that surprising. But being meme coins don't really have any real world practical use, and so um, a lot of at least the discussion among long time crypto investors is that they're kind of not super happy about the fact that the Melania and Donald are doing that, because they don't think that the coins are necessarily going to be really great long term prospects, but they certainly are pumping right now. The problem that I think most people who've been in the space for a long time are kind of saying is, look, these are meme coins. Meme coins don't really have great long term prospects in some or many cases. Uh, and what may happen is that uh, they'll do gangbusters right now when they're first getting introduced and everyone's really excited about it, but eventually they'll not really have much long term investment staying power, because eventually the Trumps are not going to. They're going to leave the White House and somebody else will rise and take over. At least I hope so. I wouldn't I particularly like a dictator in the U.S. That would be a tricky situation for us here, I think. Um, but at least for the time being, my point is that those coins may later become rather, may later prove to be good short opportunities, good coins um, to sell rather than buy, because they may just sort of peter out and become not really very valuable after a while. But maybe not. I mean, you never know with the crypto market or with any of these markets. But um, good short-term opportunities, but probably not something you'd want to like hold for a super long time. Um, but they're kind of pulling a lot of focus away from other altcoins right now, and Bitcoin. Which is kind of interesting, kind of sucking the air out of the room for a lot of these other coins. Which, if we're trying to find a dip in which to open along, this might provide us with an opportunity. So we'll see. In terms of our momentum oscillator, we're not really getting any signals. These white pluses are not lighting up, but we are moving towards a the apex of kind of the dip in this oscillator. If I do my thing that I'm sort of not, I have some reservations as to whether or not I'll actually keep doing this, and kind of try to figure out where we may be headed in terms of this next wave. Really more, frankly, exactly. Let's see, how can we set this cycle up so that it actually may make a little bit of sense? We don't really know how far down this thing is going to go. But we could kind of hypothesize, I suppose, something about like that. So we could speculate that if this thing oscillator does continue like this, we may hit our a low point on this wave, perhaps somewhere around here, very roughly. Right? So that being the case, how far down do we think this guy is going to go before we get to about this point in time? Okay, roughly. Now that might be a little hard to say for sure. But I'm going to do a little speculation and see, we'll just kind of see, maybe, perhaps, if I can get a little something going. It does look, yeah, Heikinashi also suggests that we may be starting a downwards leg here. We've kind of crossed over, found a little support, came up, tried to get a breakout, but instead are going back down. So it looks like we're starting another sweep down here. So yeah, I would agree we're probably about to break downwards with this one, although we will have to see. Now it may find support and move back up into this sort of wedge pattern, but I'm gonna have to just kind of find out, I think. Unless, of course, we're really talking about more of something like this. But these things will have to sort of unfold, and this low would not be really taken into account if we are, in fact, just doing a wedge that's a little bit bigger. For now, though, I'm just going to leave that set up the way it is, and we're going to be thinking along the lines of a downwards break, because that's what the oscillator and the Heikinashi also suggest. And so the question is, we got a downward wick here, and now we seem to be kind of, at least on the daily, although how far are we into the daily at this point? It's pretty close to midnight where I am. Is kind of suggesting that we may be finding a little bit of support right around this level. And we had set, our proposed trigger kind of around here. And so it almost looks like we're finding a little bit of support, even a bit higher than that now. But of course, it does also look like we've got a little bit further down to go. So what we're kind of going to look for on the hourly chart for this one, this blue line is the bottom of our wedge that we've marked out on the daily chart based on this low right here. And what we're going to be looking to see is, can this thing find, see, it didn't find support here successfully, which would have almost kind of kept us in the wedge. And so now we've gone down, and we're going to see, is it going to find resistance when it gets up here and tries to get back into the wedge? It looks like it already has once, and now we're testing it again. If it cannot successfully break to the upside here, then we'll probably just continue down in a bearish movement on the hourly. Is what that kind of looks like to me. oh, okay. So, is there anything that we can use here to help us figure out where we might be at this point? Well, um, not really there, I think. Okay. As I recall, tried doing and had a little bit of arguable, this is all relative, success trying to do things, extrapolating using the RSI here. Although, on the daily chart, as much as our oscillator may be indicating we're moving pretty far down, our RSI is getting kind of on the lower side for this guy. On the daily chart, what's the weekly chart look like? I wonder in terms of... Yeah, and also on the weekly chart. And this is why I'm kind of wondering if... oh, joy. I'm kind of wondering if we shouldn't perhaps consider starting it at about 26, because the weekly RSI is getting pretty low, and it's also low on the daily as well. So we may indeed move down, but I kind of have a hard time believing that we're actually going to go all the way down to 22 or 21. We might. Those are support levels. And I don't want to... setting these trigger prices, I think I'd rather go a little bit too low and just not have the trigger go off, rather than have a situation where the trigger, where the bot starts and then gets liquidated right away. But just looking at this sort of fundamental basic RSI indicator, it's not looking super duper to me like this is gonna this is really gonna break that hard downwards. We may instead just go to the bottom of where this wedge started, perhaps, instead of doing that. Here, let's I think we had an RSI divergence. Yeah, an RSI divergence indicator here that I can just... I like to use this. Sometimes I'll just slap this on here just to kind of see what divergences are coming out of the woodwork in the regular RSI. A lot of bearish ones and one bullish one here recently. Okay. So we're not necessarily getting a whole lot here that's going to help us in terms of projecting where, if this thing breaks to the downside, where it's going to break. In this sort of span of time. Since we've got a moment in time that we've kind of marked out, though, we may perhaps consider how far should we take? No, I think I'd have to think about it a little bit more, honestly. I don't really have a great feel for exactly how far down this guy is going to go. I don't think that 26 cents would be a bad place to open the bot, but I also kind of don't know that I would feel super comfortable leaving a trigger price set there. Yeah, so I think I'll leave it at about 18 cents. That way, if this thing just really tanks and prints a really long uh, downwards wick, we might be able to catch like a really crazy good lucky long opening position. But I kind of feel I can't help but feel like realistically, if we are breaking out of this downwards wedge, if we do find resistance here, we may need to end up starting the bot closer to 26 cents. Because we may ultimately kind of just need to move this wedge pattern indicator down to like right here, depending on what we see over the next couple of days. Um, it may turn out that this low is just kind of an internal low within the wedge pattern. Um, yeah, even until or unless I can kind of get a better bead on when this guy might. You see, because this has got a signaling kind of along on the no sure thing indicator. And also on the hourly. Um, but there was a real basic way that I was using this RSI encoder to project things. I think. Oh, that's right. But the trouble is, it's sort of already getting close to the bottom here. I can't help but speculate that I don't know. I'm just looking awfully hard at this 26 cent level as being possibly where this guy comes down and finds its bottom really um, before coming back up, because it's getting real low on the weekly, getting real low on the daily here. Um, so I don't know exactly how much more downwards movement we can really count on from this one, and this being an area of pretty significant support going down to about 26 cents. I really think that's where we may end up with our target, but I also don't necessarily want to set a trigger there, because if Bitcoin or something takes a nosedive temporarily downward corrects, this also might dip way down further than I'm hoping. In which case, it might end up with a bad entry point. So at least for the time being, until we say otherwise, I'm going to continue to have this set up with going from 16 cents to $1, with our trigger price being at 18 cents. And what we're going to do for the next few days, especially with the inauguration being tomorrow, I'll be at work all day tomorrow, so I won't have a lot of time to necessarily mess with things. Um, but often the market cools off following an event like that, and we may see this dropping and even getting down below this low, in which case we might start looking for an even lower entry point than what I'm thinking at 26 cents. Um, but at least for the time being, I'm just going to leave it there where it is. Those are my thoughts, guys, on SXP on solar for right now, and we're paying a lot of attention, giving these charts a lot of love for this coin. But that's kind of what you want to do at the beginning for these coins, and hopefully we can get this project going, and it'll do just fine. So thank you for watching and listening. This is the Trade Game Channel. This is Daniel. It's January the 19th. Please do click the like button, even if you've already liked one of our other videos. The more likes we get on these videos, the more views we get, and the more subscribers we have, the more likely it is that we will get some attention in the algorithm, and maybe have more people joining us in our little association that we have started. So we appreciate that. If you want to leave a comment down below, I do check the comments, and I'll try to respond to you. But anyway, That's it. God be with you. Please be good to one another, and I will talk to you later. I'm going to bed, man.